We love supporting and promoting the creators of musical theater throughout the world, and we would love to have your support as well. Go to musicaltheaterradio.com and click on the Become a Patron button because a supportive community is a strong community. Welcome back to another episode of Be Our Guest here on Musical Theater Radio. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Yovanov. Now, everybody knows the big hit musicals of the last 30 years. Dear Evan Hansen, Come From Away, Book of Mormon, Avenue Q. You just have to mention the name Hamilton and people break into song. But if I say Bright Star or Grey Gardens or Tuck Everlasting, most people can't even name a song from the show, let alone sing a song from the show. Now, a new book just came out called Musical Misfires, the 3 Decades of Broadway Musical Heartbreak. And today we are going to be talking to one of the authors of that book. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to the show, Mark Robinson. Mark, welcome.
Thank you. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Awesome.
How you doing?
I love the concept of the book, and I can't wait to delve into it and learn more about it. But I always start every interview the same. I want to get your 30-second bio. Who is Mark in 30 seconds?
Okay, well, Mark Robinson, let's see. I went to school at SUNY Cortland for theater, and where I met my co-author, who was my professor, Thomas Hishak, we wrote the book together. And I became his research assistant, and he has written many, many books on theater and film, particularly about musicals. And worked with him. I went off, I became a teacher, I taught theater, and he got this idea that maybe we should write a book together, and we did our first book together, the Disney Song Encyclopedia, that came out about 10 or 11 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And then that got me writing some of my own books. And then my friend Robbie Rozelle, who works at Broadway Records, suggested maybe I should write a Broadway musical blog, since this was my area. And so I started writing a blog, and eventually Professor Hishak and I came back together and decided we wanted to do another book together. We had a good time doing the last one, and Robbie Rozelle had suggested that the idea for this particular book, Musical Misfires, he and I had both, loved Not Since Carrie, and nobody else had picked up the ball to write something new about the new shows that didn't run. So I suggested it to Professor Hishak, and together we wrote this book. We started in about August of last year with the research and putting it together.
Very cool. So before we get into the book and all that stuff, I want to find out from yourself, were you always into musicals growing up, or was that something you discovered a little bit later in life?
Well, yes, pretty much. I drove my family crazy singing The Wizard of Oz and Disney music, movie musicals all over the house. And then somewhere around 7th grade, my 7th grade music teacher showed us the movie of South Pacific. Now, in retrospect, I'm not so crazy about the movie of South Pacific, but then I fell in love with it, and it led to me checking out a book out of our high school library, the Rodgers and Hammerstein songbook, and it had all the songs from Rodgers and Hammerstein in there and a little background. And from there, I started going to the public library and looking up in their cast recording section, and borrowing records, checking out scripts from the library, reading those. So from about age 11 or 12, I really started getting into the research aspect of it. You can ask my biology teacher, who I used to get in trouble in biology class because instead of taking notes, I would copy the cast lists and performance runs in my notebook. Because I really had no interest in biology, but
Nice. So did you want to be a performer, or were you just in love of musical theater in general?
I did want to be a performer, and I still occasionally do perform. I direct more often than I perform. I directed some shows out at the Great Plains Theater in Kansas, a professional theater out in Abilene, Kansas, where I was also the youth director, but I also directed some of the professional shows at the theater. I like doing it all. I've costume designed. I've done scenic design. I don't do lighting design because I don't get on ladders. But other than that, I just love theater from from every aspect, but history particularly just has always been kind of my niche area. I just, I can't get enough reading about the past and learning about old shows and trying to preserve them too, because that's been important to me, that people don't forget art. So.
Very nice. So let's delve right into the book. Tell me a little bit about musical Misfires. What is just the overall? What is the book?
Well, in the past, musicals that didn't run were called flops, and Professor Hishak and I, or Tom, I should call him Tom Hishak now. Tom Hishak and I kind of rejected the idea that every musical that hasn't run is necessarily a flop. Mm-hmm. Yes, some of them didn't make money. Yes, some of them didn't run for very long. Some of them ran for very long and didn't make money. But a lot of them are still being performed. Some of them had, and many of them really had so many attributes that stood out, terrific songs, or an interesting concept, or a breathtaking staging that was unlike anything else you'd seen on Broadway before. And we wanted to pick up and tell the stories of these shows, how they came about. Now, not everyone was a hit, and there were a couple that even I had a hard time finding a nice thing to say about, but tried. Mm-hmm. And yet the book is just, has 151 titles in it from 1989 to the present. And there's something to recommend in just about every one of these shows in one way or the other. And I think people need to know about these shows. You say Dear Evan Hansen and Hamilton and Wicked and and all, and everybody knows these shows, but there's really only a handful of shows that everybody knows from the last 30 years.
Yeah. So what was the criteria?
Oh, that is the question of the year. Yeah. Well, first of all, we looked at performance runs. We looked at what made money, what didn't. Really what it came down to was that it was kind of by our decision. I think that most people would agree with most of the titles we put in there. And I think that they would definitely argue a couple of the musical, like Andrew Lloyd Webber's Sunset Boulevard, a misfire after it ran 800 and something performances and everybody's done it, but the show didn't make money. And so we wanted to tell that story as well, that shows can run and run and run and not make money. Not that we have anything against Sunset Boulevard. In fact, it's got some great stuff in it, but we wanted to be able to demonstrate to people that these shows that we were calling flops, by that standard, is Sunset Boulevard a flop? Well, no, but but it didn't make money, and it makes it. I thought it made a more interesting book to look at some of the shows that maybe did run and didn't make money.
So, well, let's use that as a jump off point then. Which shows ran for a while but didn't make money?
Well, Sunset Boulevard is probably the chief example. The other one is Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. That ran forever and ever, and somebody's still paying those bills. Those were the two big ones, and I don't think Spider-Man was a giant surprise for anybody in the book, but I think Sunset Boulevard maybe was. And then there's shows like Stephen Sondheim's Passion that won all these Tony Awards. People revere Passion, but Passion didn't run for very long, didn't make its money back. And, and so we also looked at that. And again, not in a judgmental way, but in which of these stories did we want to tell? And as I said, we came up with 151 stories to tell. So it was all over the board. And some of these shows are so obscure. A lot of people I'm sure have no idea what some of these shows are in the book. And, because they only ran for like 6 performances here, or 1 performance here, 3 performances there. And yet they too had interesting things to say, and we included them in the book. We also tried to include as many pictures as we could afford. When you self-publish a book and you're paying for pictures, it's kind of hard to, load it with as many pictures as you'd like. But we did manage to get, I think, 42 pictures into the book, most of them color, but tried to get some of these shows that people don't know, tried to get some pictures of them in there so that they could, say, oh, that's what that looked like. That was what that was about. But tracking down the pictures and then finding them and paying for them after a while, there was only so many we could get in the book. And
For sure. For sure. I'd love to know about some of these more obscure ones, because that's one of my passions. I love learning about new shows. And on the radio station, I play, of course, all the Hamilton, the Dear Evan Hansen, but I'm looking at the list just on your website, and I play almost all of these shows that you've listed. What are some of the really obscure ones that we might not know about?
Well, the one that sticks out in my and research is in the day. I'm drawing on my memory here. So somewhere 192 season maybe was called Metro, and it came from Poland, and it took place in a subway. In many ways, if you read about it, it's kind of a precursor to Rent. It's about a bunch of artists and homeless people, and they all put together a performance in a subway, and it only ran for a couple of weeks. It did receive one Tony nomination.
Wow.
But nobody knows about it. I remember reading about it because at that time I was right out of high school at the time, and I was following the musical Nick and Nora, which is kind of my favorite misfire / flop of all time. It was the first show that I had read about in the New York Times a few years earlier about its gestation, and began following and saving every clipping that was in the Times, and kind of chronicling that show with the idea that I would go see it when it opened. I was so excited, and I had gone to New York City, and it was probably November. And I could see Nick and Nora, which was in previews, but I also wanted to see The Secret Garden, which had been running a while. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I'll see The Secret Garden because Nick and Nora hasn't opened yet, and it'll run, and I'll go back and see it. Well, Nick and Nora opens in December. 9 performances later, it closes, and I never got to see Nick and Nora officially, but I've had a wonderful time researching it. Actually, the book itself. This book it's the first chapter of the book is all about Nick and Nora. Because it kind of exemplifies all the different possibilities of the way things can go wrong for a musical. Because, if a show ever had any kind of problems trying to come together, Nick and Nora seems to me, even in many ways, outshine Spider-Man in that aspect.
Did you see any connection between all of these shows that are in your book? Any overlying themes that each musical had in common with the next, and went, okay, this is why it might be considered a misfire?
Wow. I would say maybe half of them I could see that. In other cases, you couldn't quite figure it out. In the case of Sunset Boulevard, that I couldn't even find a connection with that. But but I think the thread that I saw the most, that recurred the most throughout the book, was a loss of objectivity by the creators of the show. That all of a sudden they got too close to the project, or were too determined to make certain things work without understanding it wasn't, and they just weren't going to let it go, or they didn't want to replace certain songs, or they didn't realize that the writing wasn't working. I think that's been the biggest recurring thread I've seen, in writing the book. I think sometimes, often actually, there's a mistake in sometimes this idea that a really small musical plays well on Broadway, and sometimes it does. I can't say that it doesn't always work, but there are times where shows should have stayed off Broadway, or should have considered going off Broadway instead of trying to fill a giant Broadway theater when the show was too intimate for that kind of cavernous space.
Yeah. I can see the lure of money. I totally understand it, but sometimes you got to realize I'd rather run longer in a smaller house that costs way less, and recoup that way. But.
Absolutely. There's some terrific shows out there. Triumph of Love was absolutely a wonderful musical. Gorgeous score, very interesting plot, great cast, but small. And in my opinion, that show should have run and run, but it would have done better in a small, intimate space. And I think that's the only thing that hurt that show. You've got Betty Buckley's name over the title. Why why isn't that show selling? You know, I mean, Betty Buckley. um,
it's crazy, the hit and miss aspect of theater and musicals. You
it
would
really
think
is.
one would work, but it just doesn't for whatever reason. I'm looking again at some of the shows, and I'd love, and I'm going to throw a few of them at you, and maybe you can give us an idea of why you thought it was a misfire. Something like, we'll start with Xanadu. What do you think made that one end up being a misfire for you?
Well, I think there's a few things. Well, first of all, it opened very early in the season. That was a show that opened, I want to say, like July or August, right, not long after the Tony Awards of the previous year. So it had the whole year to try to, create that momentum that goes into the Tony Awards. Whereas, most shows tend to want to open in the spring and build that momentum right up to the Tony Awards. And Xanadu was nominated for several Tony Awards, didn't win any, and now I'm drawing a blank on what show did win that season. But all of the enthusiasm was behind that particular show. Xanadu got good to great reviews. You go through the through the reviews that were written for that show, and people loved it. People were walking out, joyously speaking of it and saying that what a great time they had. But it was also a musical that spoofed an unpopular, an iconically unpopular film. And I'm not sure if maybe that drove some people away, people thinking, oh God, the movie was so bad, why would I want to go see the stage show? I think there's enough people who don't look far enough into something to, say, oh, well, they're kind of poking fun at it. That might be fun, and go see it. I don't know that, most of the real theater aficionados make that mistake, but I think your general ticket buying public might.
I'm looking at this one. I love the cast recording of this one, Steel Pier. I never got to see it, but I've listened to the recording so many times.
Oh yeah. I didn't get to see Steel Pier either. I had to really, Tom Hishak wrote this one because I believe he did see Steel Pier. And but I do know the show well enough. I've read the script. I've read the history, read the reviews. Well, first of all, it was a very tricky year that all these musicals opened in a very short period of time. Steel Pier, Titanic, and The Life were all new musicals that were opening in that spring, as well as Jekyll and Hyde, which was a big audience favorite, although not to the Tony Committee so much, although they did nominate a few things. And then, believe it or not, of course, the big revival of Chicago opened that year, and so Candor and Ebb were competing against themselves with a show that people already knew. So I don't think that helped Steel Pier. I think Steel Pier also, demanded a lot of from its audience. I think it demanded them to pay very close attention to what was going on, because there were these little plot twists in it, giving you hints at, at the fact that the one character may or may not be a ghost. And, but yeah, I was a little surprised about that one when again, I was following reviews and, I was still relatively young then, and I thought Steel Pier was going to be the big hit of the season. I was absolutely sure it was going to be. I thought Titanic was going to tank big time, and I saw Titanic, and I love about the first 20 minutes of Titanic, and then I kind of got lost interest with it. I think the music is gorgeous for the first 20 minutes, and then after that, not so much. I guess I just lost interest, especially when the ship is going to sink. Whereas Steel Pier, I wanted to see it, but by the time I could get around to seeing it, it had closed again. It's another one of those examples where I think, oh, this show is going to run forever. I won't have any trouble. It's a Candor and Ebb. Yeah. Well. Yeah, Candor and Ebb have definitely had their share of misfires and flops. But I knew Chicago Cabaret, and I'd seen Kiss of the Spider Woman and absolutely loved that. So I thought everything that they touched was gold until I found some of their other stuff that it still is wonderful, but just didn't run.
Here's another one that I found surprising: Shrek. like the theater company I work with in Toronto here at the university, they put that on a couple of years ago. Like, it's
Oh yeah.
done so much. What do you think happened on Broadway that Shrek deserves to be in the book?
Um, a couple of things. I think that Shrek was, I think, looked at along the same lines as most of the Disney musicals. Kind of, that same, even though it's not a Disney musical, that it's family entertainment. I don't think people take it quite as seriously as some of the I mean, you've got The Lion King, which everybody, is very reverent about. But, so when Beauty and the Beast first showed up on Broadway, people weren't, as quick to embrace Disney being on Broadway. I mean, they bought the tickets, but critically, they weren't, too excited about the idea of Disney producing on Broadway. Obviously, they've made a pretty good run of it. Mm-hmm. Where Shrek was concerned, I think, I mean, Shrek didn't run a horrible run. It was, I think, in the 400s, somewhere 400 and something performances, which is about a year.
Yeah.
But at running for a year at, with the kind of special effects and costumes and the amount of, the size of the cast and the amount of technical people you needed and the orchestra, to run 400 performances run a whole year, you're still not making money. If you have to close at 400. I think Shrek is an example of it was expensive to run. I think it and I think that the steam ran out on it, and it didn't win a whole lot of Tony Awards. I think it just picked up one Tony Award that year. I want to say costume design, I think. And that's not enough momentum past the Tony season to keep going. So my guess is that that kind of hurt Shrek as well, to not pick up any of the major Tony Awards.
Now, in the writing of the book, you said that you read the script to a Steel Pier. Did you do that with all of the shows that you did, or how did you go about your research?
It was all over the board. Sometimes it was in a lot of it was sorting through interviews and trying to get a good concept of the show by piecing together what all the critics said. Sometimes it was I'd seen the shows. Sometimes Professor Hishak had seen the shows. Sometimes we'd both seen the shows, and then it was an arm wrestle over who got to write that entry. Sometimes it was getting out the script. Sometimes it was if the script wasn't available, interviewing people who were in the cast. Sometimes I'd have to email somebody and hope I had the right email, or find them on Facebook and, are you the so and so who was in this show? And people were pretty generous about answering our questions. But there's no one good answer about how any one show was treated, because each one was a different approach. I would say, about how we got the information together. So in some places people were able to provide video for us or audio. It was just all over the place.
Which show was the easiest to research, and which one gave you the most difficulty?
Easy. I think the hardest one we came across was a change in the air. There was very little about that out there, including reviews. And that was a real struggle for us to find information on. And we did end up finding some people who were involved in the show who were able to help us out. And then the easiest show to research, oh my gosh, probably for me was Nick and Nora, because I already had an entire notebook full of stuff on it. It was all sitting there waiting for me to just. But the more recent the show, the easier it was. I mean, you go back to the 1990s and the shows that we're talking about in the early 90s, internet and websites were not as available as they are now. Information wasn't being put up. So the further back in time you went, the harder it was to find information on the shows. I mean, Tuck Everlasting, which I did see on Broadway. I mean, I could go on the internet and I could find 20 reviews. I could find articles about the show, an interview with a cast member here, those kind of things. So you're able to piece together, enough information at that point, but going back, like I said, Changing the Air, which I think is early 90s. Drawing a blank on that too. But that was a toughie. That was a toughie, but fortunately, we were able to get in touch with a person who had been in the cast and somebody who had been in the Chicago production before it came to New York, so we could talk a little bit about the show's evolution and things like that. But yeah.
Okay. This is a two-parter. Did you talk to any of the creatives of any of these shows? And if so, and you don't have to say who, if there was there any backlash to saying, oh no, my show wasn't a misfire, it was awesome, and what are you talking about?
I would say it was a very rare occasion that we talked to anyone who wrote music or lyrics or book. I think it was such a touchy thing. I felt that it would be insensitive to them to try to, hey, your musical bomb, can I talk to you for a few minutes about it? Yeah. On the other hand, there was, I think, two that I can think of for sure that I did speak to, and they were very generous about it, but I also, I wanted to tell them, like, we're not trying to tell the negative story of your musical. We're trying to tell the positive story of this was something we want to remember, that even though the show for whatever reason didn't run, we want to commemorate it anyway, so that it's not forgotten. And I think once they understood that that's what we were shooting for, people were more willing to open up.
Yeah, makes sense. Because I'm looking at the list again, and Carolina changed. I just saw that 6 months ago here in Toronto. It is a great show, but it's not an audience friendly show. It's not an easy show, and lyrically, it's got some weird stuff, but it's great. But I can see why it's on that list too.
Easily, it's one of the most one of the most challenging shows in the book. Sure. I think it was the type of musical that that off Broadway or in a theater that is subsidized or not for profit, that show can succeed, but for a limited engagement. I don't think it's the type of show that runs openly for long periods of time, because it's not what's going to attract your typical theater goer.
Yeah. Wasn't there a talk that it was coming back to Broadway?
It was all set to come back this last spring, and I think it's been postponed now to 2021. I think they are still doing it. It's just been postponed a year, I believe. Don't quote me on that. But
okay. Yeah. And do you think that's gonna? Do you think do you know if it's gonna have a limited run? Because I totally understand what you're saying.
I believe it was supposed to be. I think it was a roundabout theater company that was producing it. And I think it was a limited run. Now, obviously, whenever these things, if these things do well, and all of a sudden there's this, audience for it, then it's no longer a limited run. I think most of everything today announces it's going to be a limited run until otherwise, or at least a lot of them do. I've noticed that. Oh, well, we're extending now. Oh, it's. Because people are buying tickets, yay! Yeah. Which is good. I mean, I'm glad for them that they can have these extended runs. But I think it's become the default now to just say anything's a limited run, just to save face.
Makes sense.
Well, we only said it was going to run 8 weeks.
Was there any show that you saw? Again, have to say which one it was that you just weren't a big fan of on this list, but you begrudgingly went through with it.
Gosh. I mean, there's lots of things I don't care for. It's. I don't want to say the name because there is one show on this list, and people would have me stoned in public for naming it, because I think I'm the only person on the planet who doesn't like this musical, but everybody else seems to.
We can talk off air on that one.
Yeah, I'll tell you after we're off the record. But I don't think there was. There were a couple of shows that I was like, oh God, do I have to do this one? And because we sat down with the list, Tom Hishak and I, of the 151 shows, and then started dividing them up. First, which ones we desperately wanted to do. There were certain shows that I was just absolutely hell-bent I was going to write them because I wanted to, and he felt that way about certain shows as well. And then we also looked, what shows had we both seen or had seen separately, so that like he had seen The Goodbye Girl and I hadn't seen The Goodbye Girl, so he was able to talk about the Goodbye Girl with a little more clarity than I could in any possibility where we could, offer that kind of understanding. We gave the other person, that musical to write. Like a Scottsboro Boys. He saw Scottsboro Boys, but I saw the Scottsboro Boys 5 times during its very brief run. And so I wrote, obviously I wrote that entry. But after we would write an entry, we would share it back and forth between each other, and then make notes. And so that we tried to get a consistent sound throughout the book, so that I write one way, he writes a very different way. So coming together, we had to try to figure out how do we make this book sound of one piece. And so every entry we wrote, really, I mean, there was contribution on both ends. It's just that one person sat down and wrote the entry, and then we worked from that to figure out what we wanted to add, or maybe I knew something he didn't know, or vice versa. Oh, did you know about this? You might want to look into this. And so there was a lot of back and forth. And then on top of that, every one of our entries was sent to Robbie Rozelle at Broadway Records, the one who had the idea for the book, just to get his idea, because he's right in the midst of Broadway and he hears all of what's going on. And so he would offer us some ideas on things as well. So there was a lot of collaboration in the book, and including outside of just the authors ourselves, talking to people and getting input.
Very cool. So where can you get the book now that everybody knows about it?
Well, it's an ebook, because we going into COVID, we had hoped that we were going to be able to do before COVID, I should say, that we were going to do a bound paper, paper copy of the book.
Okay.
And a lot of the publishing houses slowed down to a crawl, or furloughed their editorial staffs. And here we are halfway through a book and getting ready to be done with it. And it was becoming hard to get even anybody to look at a proposal at that point, or to look at the finished product. And, here's a year of our life. We've got to start selling the book, because, that's how, we survive, us writers, is selling our writing. Unfortunate reality of the thing, but and so we had to go with doing a digital book, a ebook, and so it is available on it's available in several locations. However, we kind of recommend everybody go to the Book Baby website, their bookstore, and look it up there. Because authors get a higher percentage on Book Baby. But
definitely do that, yes.
But it's also available on Amazon. Actually, today it's on Amazon, the #1 new release among theater books. It's been 1, 2, or 3 for the last week and a half. But among theater books, it's doing really well, and it's And then among theater books in general, it's been in the top 20 for most of the last week and a half since the book came out. The hardest problem is promoting a book that's self-published, because you don't have the strong arm of a publishing house behind you, promoting it, getting it to libraries. So we've had to be very creative about how we try to get it out there. I mean, honestly, I didn't know much about podcasts until about 5 weeks ago, when it was suggested to me that I reach out to some podcasts, and some podcasts reached out to me, and I'm like, well, I guess I can give it I'm one of those old-fashioned guys who sits down and reads the book, and likes it in hard copy. I mean, and there's still hope that sometime down the road, I can't say anytime in the near future,
for sure,
that we get a print copy done. We're talking to a publisher now. Things are starting to pick up again in the publishing world, and we finally heard from somebody. It was about the day that the book was going to be released as a ebook. We got an email from one of the publishers saying that they might be interested. Can we talk further? Can you send us the proposal again? Well, we just released it as an ebook, but if you would like to do a print copy, we'd sure be thrilled, because that's where the other market of these kind of books is libraries, and print copies is what libraries want. So we would sure love to get it into a paper copy. So
I'm old school too. I'd rather hold the book and read those pages and the
yeah,
tactile sensation. But
exactly.
so if they go, actually, you know what? If they go to markrobinsonwrites.com, your
Yep.
website, they can find the book there, right? And then they can
You
still
get
go through
the link to Book Baby is right there on the site.
Yeah. So see, then they can go to see you, find out more about your other books as well. And
Oh
then,
yeah, no, that'd be good too. Maybe
yeah,
somebody else buy one. Um,
because yeah, I scrolled through a little bit, and some of them are about theater, some of them are not. But the one that I really liked was the TV themes. But that's for a whole nother show for another
oh,
thing. But we'll
that
skip
was my
this.
first book on my own. And frankly, I don't encourage anybody to buy it. But the one that I've enjoyed more was the sit commentary. The one that's it's about social change in America through television sitcoms and how TV comedy has kind of fostered the change in how we look at the world.
Mm-hmm.
And through comedy, laughing our way through social change, and so that's what that one is. But that's the one that I'm more proud of.
Okay. Well, not that you would complain if they bought them all, would you? Like,
No. Please buy them all.
yeah, go buy them all.
Please.
Mark, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me today. It was great to learn about the book and all those musicals that people should get to know better. Just because they might have been considered a misfire doesn't mean they aren't fantastic. Still should.
Oh no, there's so much great stuff out there and fun to read about. I'll tell you, it really is fun to read about.
Awesome. Well, before we go, I always do 3 questions with all my guests. Now, there's no right or wrong answer, but the last answer is you'll probably get it right or wrong. I don't know, but there is a wrong answer, just to give you a heads up. All right. So the first question, who is your favorite creator or team when it comes to either music, lyrics, or book?
Oh gosh, that is such a hard question. But
I know.
I think I find myself most attracted to the scores written by Cy Coleman.
Just you were the second person in like 3 interviews to say that, and I gave them full points for that answer.
Oh yeah. Oh good. I'm glad. I adore. City of Angels to me is one of the greatest scores written for music. I love Barnum and Seesaw and On the 20th Century. I mean, just all of them. There's no one that's a stinker. I mean, there really isn't.
I love My Wife. That one I can listen to over and over again for some reason.
Oh,
it's just
Someone Wonderful I Missed is just, I think, one of the great songs of musical theater. I was talking to Joanna Gleason a month or two ago about the book, and or no, it was probably longer than that. But anyway, and I asked her about that song. She goes, she always gets asked to sing it all the time. I just think it's a great song.
full points for that one. Doesn't matter what you say for the rest of it. I think you're gonna win this. So, congratulations on the Cy Coleman answer. I love that. Question number 2. Which of the shows that you talked about, and you've probably been asked this for, that you missed, that you really wish you'd seen because it's not coming back at any point?
Oh gosh, that is a really good question. That I missed, and I wished I had seen it, and I know it's probably not going to be around again. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I really think I wish I had seen My Favorite Year. There's always talk that it's going to come back, but I really wished I had seen that. I like the score a lot to that, and there's an energy about it, especially the opening sequence of it and the closing of that show, that I just think is there's something special about it. I don't know that the whole score holds up, but I like the idea. I think that there's still a chance to save that musical to make it work. So maybe we will see it someday, but I do think it needs some rethinking. And I know that there has been some rethinking about and the possibility of it coming back, but I've yet to see anything concrete. And those rumors have been going around for years. So
it's funny you mention that, because the theater company I'm with, we literally have the set up still for My Favorite Year, because we had to close in the middle of our run.
Oh no, really?
Yeah. So again, bonus points for choosing that show.
I've just been stalking you and researched. Probably,
so. I'm not going to complain. I'm looking at the front of the book, and King Kong would probably be one of mine, because I don't see a community theater ever putting that on.
Oh no, probably not. Not without a guy in a gorilla suit or a sock puppet. I just don't see it.
Exactly. Though part of me kind of wants to put on a community theater version of Spider-Man, with just like ropes and stuff like that. I don't know if you can get the rights for it, but I kind of want to do that.
That would be interesting.
Yeah. All right. So that's full points again for question number 2. Question number 3. Audience members eating food in the theater, yes or no?
No.
I love it. Asking that question.
I thought you were going to ask like what was my favorite musical or something. I'm like,
no. That doesn't create enough passion like this final question always does.
I understand why they're doing it. I understand theaters need to make money, and sometimes the concessions are the tipping point of whether you break even. I just 10 minutes and let them eat it in the lobby.
Yeah. I know. It's like my worst part is they leave in the garbage everywhere. That drives me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy.
Well, having been a house manager also among my many careers, yes, I agree.
Yeah. Awesome. You did beyond perfect with this questionnaire. 3 questions, like 6 correct answers. That was perfect.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Awesome. Well,
better than my SATs mark now.
Well, thank you again, Mark, so much for coming on, talking to me about the book. Remember, everybody can just go to markrobinsonwrites.com to find the ebook. I'm looking forward to checking it out myself. So yeah, again, thank you so much, Mark, for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I really had a great time.
Awesome. All right. So that was Mark Robinson here on Be Our Guest on Musical Theater Radio. Tune in next week as we'll be talking with another guest or guests about their life, love, and passion. That is musical theater. I am still Jean-Paul Yovanov. And until next time, my friends, I'll see you when I see you. We love supporting and promoting the creators of musical theater throughout the world, and we would love to have your support as well. Go to musicaltheaterradio.com and click on the Become a Patron button, because a supportive community is a strong community.